My name is Barbara Jones. I'm 66 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas, in a simple house with a porch where I grow my hydrangeas with the same care I once gave to my family. I've been called strong, patient, even silly. I'm not wanting to talk to Jeroboam. But tell me something. What should a woman do when she discovers that the husband she feeds, protects, and honors? Are you lying with your own daughter-in-law? Have you ever felt like something is wrong, but no one tells you anything? That you are there, being used as a hanger of stability, while others live hidden, dirty, and deceitful lives? I understand. What? I understand. And don't think it's easy to look in the mirror and realize that the last one to know was you. Again. But in this video, I didn't come to ask for pity. I came to tell you how I changed my husband's lubricant for industrial glue. And yes, the firefighters had to separate the adulterous couple. It may sound crazy, but by the end of this story, you'll understand why I did what I did, and why I would do it all over again. Not all revenge screams. Some just wait for the right moment. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. When firefighters broke down my bedroom door that morning, it was as if the whole world had stopped. Sirens echoed through the neighborhood. Neighbors peered out of windows with their hands over their mouths, and what they found inside will not be forgotten anytime soon. My husband and daughter-in-law, naked, glued together, begging for help. And the sheets became makeshift curtains. The screams mixed shame with pain, and the eyes of my stepson, his own son, said everything without needing a word. And to think that it all started with a tube of lubricant forgotten in the glove compartment. Oh my God. I know it may sound unbelievable, but I lived it. And if you've come this far, maybe it's because you've also felt the weight of betrayal, loneliness, disappointment with those who should protect you the most. So, Nancy Gapti, before continuing, I ask you with affection, I ask you with affection. If this story has already touched your heart, leave your like. Subscribe here to the channel. And stay with me until the end, because this is not just my story. It is that of many women who have been injured. But they decided to get up with dignity. And today, I tell everything my way. I wake up every day at 6:15 a.m. It's my internal clock. I don't need an alarm clock. The house is still dark, but I can already smell the hydrangeas through the half-open window. I like to start the day slowly, with a kettle of boiling water and a little cinnamon mixed into the coffee grounds. It's not a luxury. It's a ritual. While the smell invades the kitchen, I run my hands over the tablecloth. Adjust the chairs, clean the crumbs that no one has seen. Little things that no one notices, but that are part of the woman I am. Julian used to come down soon after, yawning loudly, saying, "Now, our friends, that smell reminds me of my mother's house." He would give me a kiss on the shoulder and sit at the head of the table, as if he were in a well-kept hotel. Sometimes I brought flowers from the supermarket, the kind that come a little wilted, but that we still put in the water. He called me my rock, and I smiled. I never liked that nickname, but I smiled. I was trying to be, after all. On Sundays, we went to St. Aloys, John's Episcopal Church, right here in Austin. Once, I liked the ladies' choir. Julian was bored, took discreet naps during the sermon, but held my hand tightly. Afterward, we would have coffee with the other faithful in the back room. Beautiful couple. You too? They said. And he was puffed up. No, I just lowered my eyes, a little embarrassed with compliments. I always preferred to be presence than appearance. During the week, I helped my friend Arlene at the North Loop grocery store. The one on the corner. You know, it was half hours. Half from the neighborhood. No. I retired early from the hospital where I was a nursing technician for 30 years. But I could never stop. I like to take care. I like to serve. Is there anything more beautiful than hearing someone say, thank you, and knowing that you made a difference in that person's day? And, no, calm. Not say something. Of course, every Friday night was sacred. I called Daniel, my stepson, a good, yes, Dennis, white honest guy, city firefighter, no. Sometimes he answered, tiredly, with a slurred voice, but he always said, Nem, Aqua. Hi, Barbara. How's the best woman in my life? He was the only one of Julian's children who really respected me. She called me Mom. Even though I knew him not. She said that I was more present than herself. I just asked him to take care of himself. And he replied, you can leave it. Mommy, my life was simple. A sequence of small precautions, things made with love, without noise. Anyone who looked from the outside would see a married woman, well resolved, serene. What I in calm was serene, and for a long time I myself wanted to believe that this was what I was. Julian had his absences. Yes, it started to arrive later, with increasingly lame excuses. He said that he was solving things about retirement, or that his children were in trouble. I knew. Sometimes it disappeared on the weekend, but I kept quiet, because then he would come back, praise me. How? Call me my foundation. I brought my favorite cookie, the butter and guava paste, and I, silly, believed it. I remember one night when we were on the porch, and he put a blanket over my shoulders, said, Anne, you're all I need. At that moment, now, I believed, because that was all I wanted to hear. And there are days when we prefer to believe the beautiful lie than face the silence of the truth. And that's exactly what I did for a long time. I closed my eyes. I ignored the signs. I focused on the chores, the flowers, the church, the cinnamon coffee, hell. But a woman who lived what I lived, who has already buried a husband, who raised children and also buried some illusions. She feels when there's something out of place, The body speaks. The soul warns. You know, there are moments in life when the silence of routine hides a muffled scream, and we go on, pretending we don't hear, because staring hurts too much. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever ignored anguish, because facing it would be more painful than bearing? If you've ever been through something like this, he comments below. I believe, or I've lived it. Sometimes, knowing that we are not alone is half the consolation. And it was during this period that a sequence of small concerns began to form within me. A strange perfume on his clothes, an absence in the gaze, a coldness that didn't exist before. Nothing blatant, nothing evident, but enough to make my stomach turn at 3 in the morning, while he slept peacefully next to me. And it was then that, on any given day, I accidentally opened the glove compartment of Julian's car, looking for the insurance card on my desk, and there, among some loose papers, there was something that changed everything. A tube, transparent, saying, familiar, irony, but that had not belonged to our intimacy for years. And in that instant, my whole soul fell silent. Because there, I knew, it was no longer imagination. It was a fact. It was meat. It was treason. But I didn't scream. I closed the glove compartment slowly, and I went straight to the kitchen. I washed my hands for long minutes, as if he was trying to take away from me something that was not physical. And then I sat down in silence, just thinking about one thing. With whom? After that day of the glove compartment, everything started to have another sound, another smell, another weight. Julian was still the same smiling man, bringing fresh bread on Sundays and asking if I wanted tea or coffee as if nothing had happened. But there was something different in his eyes, a subtle deviation when I looked at him for a long time. I began to notice how long he took in the shower at night, and how much he locked himself in the bathroom with his cell phone, something he never did before. He said it was because he was playing or answering the boys in the family group. But the sparkle in his eyes when he looks at the screen, it wasn't a father's. It wasn't a husband's. It was desire. And it wasn't for me. Nice. The clothes also started to bring smells that didn't come from my house. A sweet, floral perfume that I would never wear. And it wasn't even in his soaps. It was the perfume of a young woman, the kind they buy in expensive stores in the mall. The saddest thing is that this smell made me choke inside, but I pretended I didn't feel anything. He kept folding his shirts, pouring his coffee, and smiling at others in church. God only knows how much it cost me. One night, he arrived late. He said he had gone to a dinner with a former police colleague. His shirt was half unbuttoned, his hair messy. One day charmed. What did he watch us? How cried till he hell. And in his pants pocket, crumpled, was a cloth napkin, now, with red lipstick. I was sitting on the couch, sewing the hem of a skirt, and he threw his pants over the armchair as if it were nothing. When I went to collect it, I saw the napkin there. I took it easy. I didn't have to say a word. He looked, saw what I was holding, and said, "No, now, hot you sit sirs. It must have come along with the glass of wine. The waitress must have cleaned up with that." I just looked at him and said, "Ah, me." I didn't argue. I didn't ask for any further explanations. And that was the most painful answer I've ever given in my life, because there, me, in that, there was room for everything I could no longer hide. And those little lies began to emerge that no one notices, except those who really love. He said he was going out to solve insurance issues, but he came back with a shaved beard and minty breath. He said he was going to the bank, but the statement didn't add up. He spent hours away and came back with weak excuses and a smell on his body that was not from the city nor from the street. It was of another skin. Our bed got cold. He said that he was tired, that it was age, that men after 60 lose their appetite. But no one loses their appetite and continues to buy new underwear from brands they never cared about before. He was taking care of his appearance, getting ready, putting cream on his face, shaving his chest. All this, why did he not come? Oh, don't accept toasted by. Why, after years in which I begged for an extra affection, and he said he was headless. And even with all this, I still tried to understand. Wow. I said to myself, "Me worst down, cocked too. He's already older. No, it must be in crisis. Or maybe you just want to feel wanted." I found myself wondering if it was my fault, if I should put on more makeup, be lighter, laugh more at jokes. I started wearing the dresses he liked. I cooked the dishes he praised. I relit candles in the room. But nothing came back, neither the touches nor the looks. It was as if I was fading, little by little, disappearing from his eyes. And the worst, he pretended not to see. I remember one night when he came back from the shower with his cell phone in his hand, typing non-stop. I sat next to him, put my hand on his leg, and asked, "Julian, do you still love me?" "No." He smiled, on the silk-cups, gave me a kiss on the forehead, and said, "Of course I do, my rock." Then he went back to typing. I got up slowly, went to the kitchen, and watched the kettle boil without turning off the heat. That bubbling water said more about what I felt than any words. It was during this period that I started to observe more and talk less. I became a spectator of my own home, and as much as it hurt, I knew something was hidden in his silences, something much bigger than a getaway. It was a disrespect, an absence, a slow betrayal, which kills not with a knife, but with crumbs. I knew there was another woman, but I still had no idea who it was. But what I didn't know was that her name had been inside my house for a long time. And when I found out, it wasn't just my heart that shattered. It was my faith, my confidence, and everything I believed to be sacred. Because the question that still echoed in my head, soon I would have an answer that I could never erase from my memory. Can you guess who she was? Because I would never have imagined. Oh, it was a warm Thursday afternoon, one of those when the sun seems to go down earlier, pouring a golden light through the cracks in the garage. I was home alone, as usual, and went to Julian's car to get my bag. I was pretty sure I left her in the passenger seat after we got back from the grocery store. I got into the SUV slowly, smelling that kind of muffled smell of aged leather, mixed with the cheap perfume he wore now, a fragrance too strong, almost vulgar, like someone who wants to prove youth by force. I sat down, looked at the bench. Nothing. Hi. I leaned my body and opened the glove compartment, and it was then that I saw it. A tube, transparent, already used. The dirty lid, with residues that no wife can fool. I knew that type of lubricant well. I just hadn't seen it in our house for years. Julian said that the desire was no longer the same, that he was tired, that his age was a natural break. Oh, and there he was, with something that can only be used with desire, with intensity, with someone. Oh, time has stopped. I didn't cry. I didn't even scream. I just stared at that object as if it were talking. And he did. Oh, no. It told more than any confession. I counted to 10, took a deep breath, and closed the compartment with the same delicacy as someone who encloses a coffin. I didn't take the bag. I got out of the car with sweaty hands, as if I had touched something impure, and went straight to the kitchen sink. I washed my hands 3 times. The water was warm, but I was shaking. I stood there, my eyes, watching the drops run down my wrinkled fingers, thinking about how many times I touched that man with love, with surrender. What at autopsy one town, I. And he, fooling me like that. And what hurt the most was not the use of lubricant. That's what he symbolized. Abandonment, the lie, cowardice, the certainty that he was still a man, just not for me. I walked to the living room and sat down in the armchair, the same as always. The hydrangeas swayed outside, as if nothing was happening. Inside me, a silence took over, a mourning without burial. You know, they say that the worst loneliness is the one felt in the presence of those we love, and I confirmed that at that moment. I sat there for hours, not knowing what to do, what to think, just feeling as if my soul were sewing an answer on its own. Because one thing I already knew, he wasn't just cheating on me. He was making a fool of me. And that, my daughter, now, I see, hurts more than any horn. It is to be discarded, like old crockery in the cupboard. But a woman of my age, who has already buried a husband, who has taken care of feverish children, who has cleaned war wounds and torn souls, does not despair. She observes, she registers, and then it moves. That night, when Julian arrived, I was in the kitchen making tea. He came in smiling, said that the traffic was in chaos. He gave me a kiss on the cheek, called me my rock, Me tea. And me? I just smiled and replied, Do you want it with honey or with lemon? That's what he didn't know. While he underestimated me, thought he was in control, I had already started my wakefulness. And little did he know, hide omelets, that was the last time he called me that without paying the price. But before I tell you what I found out next, do you dare to guess who was the woman who shared that tube with my husband? Because her name was closer to me than anyone could have imagined. I don't know if it was God or fate, but that morning Julian left in a hurry, saying that he had forgotten a document in the lawyer's office. She took the keys, put on her shoes in a hurry, and left his cell phone on the living room table. Well, still unlocked. It was rare. Julian was the type who took his cell phone to the bathroom, and always face down. Oh, that caught my attention. Not because I wanted to poke around. I was never one to touch anyone's anything. People of my generation were raised with this silent respect, this faith in what is said, looking into the eye. But that day, something pulled me. I approached slowly, as if stepping on sacred ground. The screen was still on, and right at the top, an email notification. You were amazing last night, Daddy Hom. I froze. I felt my legs sink into the ground. The sender was an email with no name, just a bunch of letters and numbers, as if it had been created in a hurry. My whole body trembled, but I forced myself to breathe. I breathed as I did when Daniel was little and got sick, like when I received the news of my first husband's cancer. I sat down. I took the cell phone in my hands, and for a few seconds, I just stared at the message, reading and rereading. Daddy, the nickname Allison used. Daniel's wife, my daughter-in-law. I remembered every time she came here with a pie in her hand, laughing out loud, calling Julian my old favorite. I remembered the way she hugged him from behind in the kitchen, the jokes, the afternoons when they solved things from the registry office together. I thought it was friendship. I thought it was affection. And line 92 not Tayan. I thought everything was fine. But now, it all made sense. The mysterious comings and goings, the new clothes he bought, no, the lame excuses. My husband was lying down with his son's wife, and I had served her coffee. I had made lasagna, opened my home, my heart. I went back to my cell phone. I tried to open the email. There was nothing else. He had cleaned everything. Inbox, sent, my city down, trash can. It was clean as an altar before the service. Julian knew what he was doing. And yet, when you asked, he made a mistake. He left that little piece exposed. It was as if God said, Barbara, look. At that moment, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. But it was as if a part of me had died there. An innocent, reliable party. And it accepts the woman who believed in love, even after so much grief, who allowed herself to love again. to forgive, to start over. And he trampled on all this with a cruelty that I still find difficult to understand today. I'm here, opening my heart, telling my story with all the wounds open. If you're there listening to me, accompanying me here, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. This gives me the strength to continue, because there is still a lot I need to tell, things that hurt, but that maybe helps someone get up from the same ground I walked on that day. I closed the phone calmly. I put it in the same place where he left it. I went back to the kitchen and went to prepare lunch. Yes, lunch. Because even in the most absurd pains, life goes on. The beans need to be stirred. The rice needs to be ready. And I needed to keep watching. I wasn't going to confront it yet. Not before you are sure. Not before understanding how far this dirt went. Because if he had the courage to do this with his son, what else would it be able to do? And if you think that was the worst part, I tell you, what in you on town. It hasn't been yet. What I found out next. It made this email seem like just the beginning of a much deeper poison. Want to know what else he hid from me? You'll find out. And when I told Daniel, that's when everything started to fall apart. I was always a woman who kept things in the right places. Old recipes, children's tickets, Christmas cards, even business cards. Those that we receive and don't really know what for. But that day, no. As if by signal, no. I opened the drawer of my nightstand, and there it was. An aged card with worn edges, written in firm letters, Thomas B. Whitetown, Jenkins, Private Investigations. I immediately remembered Mrs. McKinney, my neighbor across the street, who years ago found out that her husband had a second family in Houston thanks to this man. She kept saying, if one day you need it, this one will solve it. He doesn't say much, but he sees everything. I put the card away without ever imagining that one day it would be me on the other side of the table. I called the number. Now, a deep voice answered. No. He asked who it was, heard my silence, and then said, oh, we can talk in a quiet place. Roaster's Cafe, East Austin, tomorrow, 9 in the morning. I put on a discreet dress, combed my hair, as I always did on Sundays, and took with me a bag with 3 proofs. The tube of lubricant inside a plastic bag, the receipt from a fancy restaurant hidden in a pants pocket, and a photo from my cell phone showing the email with the phrase that still burned my eyes. Thomas was a dry man, in his 60s, bald, Gedanford stone, glasses hanging from the tip of his nose. He didn't beat around the bush. He only said, you can trust me. What do you need to know? And I counted. Not everything, not yet, but enough for him to understand the size of the dirt. He wrote everything down in a small notebook, as if he had seen it many times. He took the evidence, handed me a service receipt, and before leaving, said, Rain, I'll give you news soon. I promise total secrecy. I left the cafe with cold hands, short steps, my heart in a grip that mixed fear and relief. It was as if I had opened the door of an old basement, full of webs, and now I had no way to go back. I needed to know the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt, because from the moment a woman chooses not to be silent, she needs to be ready for what comes. I got home, went straight to the shelf, and took out my old recipe book, the one where I write down the dishes I learned from my mother, my mother-in-law, my friends from church. In it, I wrote in firm handwriting, wow. Day 14, meeting with a detective. Wow. Evidence delivered. Observe changes in behavior. And so began my new ritual. Each day, a note. Every strange sigh, every loose sentence, every misplaced excuse. It was like assembling a bitter dish, recipe by recipe, with all the ingredients of betrayal. Julian, on the other side, was the same. He still called me my rock. He still said, God bless you, when I sneezed. Juan. He still smiled as if nothing was happening. And that, wow, for me, was the cruelest. Seeing his calm, when a much out, it said you were syncretized. While inside, I collapsed in silence. But I stood firm. I served coffee, had lunch with him, sat on the porch. Only now, I watched everything. The eyes, the pockets, wow, the trips to the bathroom. I became a watchman in my own home. It's strange how pain changes us. Before, I was the woman who made cookies and folded socks. Now, I was the one who recorded lies and checked messages. But I didn't lose my essence. I just changed the tools. I stopped being passive and started to be careful. And deep down, I knew when the truth came, it would come like a gale, and I needed to be ready to not only see, but act. Because, no, after all, what else did that man hide behind that Sunday smile? And what would the detective find when he started following in his footsteps? I was about to find out. And what came next? It would take the floor away, even from those who think they've seen it all. There were 5 days of silence, 5 days in which every ring on the phone made me jump. Ah, Thomas gave no sign. I went on with my life on automatic. Washing clothes, ironing coffee, no Alborgia, you wonder dog. Serving at the grocery store with Darlene, as if nothing had happened. Julian continued with his soft apologies and light hands, all the time smiling as someone who lives in peace. At times, I watched him with a mixture of disgust and curiosity. How can a man cheat so deeply and still sleep peacefully next to the woman who loves him? Perhaps only those who have no soul can achieve this. On the morning of the 6th day, the doorbell rang. It was a simple delivery, a brown envelope, with my name written by hand. No sender. I knew right away. I sat at the kitchen table, wine pound, with shoulder, leave the west, akasonashatai. My kettle still beeping on the stove. Why? But I didn't get up. I opened it calmly, as if touching an old wound. Inside, lit down, there were 4 printed photos, matte paper, bone. 3 are common, Julian walking into an expensive restaurant near the lake in downtown Austin. The fourth, it made my blood run cold. Allison, wow, in high heels, tight dress, smiling with downcast eyes. Julian's hand held hers. I stood still for a few seconds. Then I leaned my back on the chair and closed my eyes. The sound of the kettle's whistle seemed distant. Ah, it was her, now, out. My daughter-in-law, Miriam, Daniel's wife, the woman who called me Mom at Christmas, who wrote me gratitude for everything notes, who asked for my pecan pie recipe as if it were a family heirloom. She, the one whom I welcomed as a daughter, Miriam, who sat at my table, then Aho, who won my affection, my trust, my home. I didn't cry. I put the photos back in the envelope, closed them carefully, and kept them in the drawer where the old refrigerator and microwave manuals are. A place of cold things without effective value. Then I got up, turned off the kettle, and poured myself tea as if the world hadn't turned upside down. It's strange how we react to pain when it's already past the limit. I didn't scream anymore. He didn't tremble. No, the pain was now a thick silence, like a cloud inside the chest. And there, sitting in that kitchen where so many smiles were served, wow, I understood. Oh, what hurt me was not only Julian's betrayal, it was Allison's betrayal. A young woman I protected as the daughter I never had, who said he loved Daniel, who smiled with him in the living room, hugged him in the photos, and lay with his father in his spare time. It was more than disrespect. It was a dirty cowardice, a perverse family theater. None. And yet, I didn't call Daniel. I didn't tell anyone. Because, look, when the truth is too rotten, it needs to be revealed at the right time. Throw such a bomb on a child's chest, and you can destroy what's left of goodness in their world. I knew the pain. But Daniel, not yet. And he didn't deserve to know the worst way. He deserved justice. And I knew she was coming. By the way, if you've come this far with me, don't let go now. Handed you Thomas. No. What I still have to tell you will make you see each person around you. Because sometimes the one who sits next to you at Sunday lunch is exactly the one who is stabbing you in the back when dessert is over. And I saw it with my own eyes in the days that followed. And then I started to look at Allison in a different way. She still came here sometimes. He still smiled. He still pretended. But now I saw the lie dancing in her eyes, the way she talked too much, how she hugged lightly. Well, now, how she avoided eye contact for a long time. Julian, on the other hand, acted with astonishing naturalness. Perhaps he thought he was clever. No, that he was irresistible. That no one would ever suspect two traitors masquerading as a happy family. But I was seeing everything and taking notes in the recipe book, which now housed secrets alongside the biscuit and roast chicken recipes. I wrote, "Whoa, evidence received. Allison confirmed. The dinner on the sly. Touch hands." She laughed. I turned my pain into data. Wow. Because If he was good at erasing traces, I'd be better at preserving them. And, deep down, I knew that envelope was just the beginning. What would come next? It would make me make a decision that no woman my age wants to make. But that, sometimes, is the only way out to preserve the little that is left of dignity. Can you imagine what a woman like me does? When do you find out that your own husband and daughter-in-law are laughing at her behind her back? Well, get ready, because what I found later, hidden in the guest room, I'd made the photos seem like just a gentle warning. I never imagined that one day my own house would become the scene of such humiliation. My home, where I planted hydrangeas with my hands dirty with dirt, and my heart cleansed of sorrows, where I prepared dinners with love and faith, where the smell of fresh coffee and shortbread were part of my identity. That same home was about to be stained with the worst kind of dirt, the betrayal done inside my ceiling, on my bed, with the silence of the walls as the only witness. It was Thomas who told me, he called me on a Wednesday morning, a firm voice, as always, but this time, with a regret that I recognized from afar. Barbara is going to take her to his house. Saturday. He scheduled it for the afternoon, around 3. I was speechless. Thomas waited. Well, then he continued. I'd say Ryle, I'm not you, Bidiose, or best at all. He thinks you will be out. He said something about a trip to Dallas. I didn't have any trips, but then I understood. Julian planned everything. I knew that on Saturday I used to visit my friend Mabel, who lives in Grapevine. Only this time, I wouldn't go. Nandinem on the counter. I got sounds cowed. I calmly hung up the phone. I went to my recipe book and wrote, Saturday, 3 p.m. House will be invaded. Me? Prepare the ground. No. The feeling that invaded me was no longer pain. It was indignation. Dry rabies. How can anyone, meanwhile, after everything I have done for him, have the audacity to take his lover, his own daughter-in-law, into the house where I built my second new beginning? This was not just betrayal, it was desecration, and at that moment I knew that the tables had turned, not for fighting, not for scandal, but for justice. I started my plan without haste. I took my old tape recorder, the one I used to record meetings at the time of the hospital. Then I went to Walmart, bought 2 more, small, discreet, cheap. I placed one behind the living room lamp, another inside the nightstand drawer, and the third under the kitchen shelf. I hid a tiny camera, which Daniel had given me for Christmas, and which I never knew how to use properly, behind the clock on the shelf. I did everything with steady hands and an ice heart. I didn't tremble once. The day before I met them, I knocked on the door of Mrs. Hudson, my neighbor, a widowed lady like me, a long-time friend. I made up that the heater was having a problem, and that I didn't want to spend the night alone with the smell of gas. She welcomed me without question. I took with me only a change of clothes and my bag. I left everything at home exactly as Julian expected to find it. Table set, running still, room clean, lash abtile, clothes folded, down, as if his wife had gone out for another weekend of rest. But that Saturday, I didn't go to Grapevine. I stood there on the other side of the fence in silence, and I watched it all happen. It's hard to explain the feeling of seeing your sanctuary being violated, the key turning in the lock you chose, the laughter entering where there were once prayers, the footsteps invading the intimacy you've built with years of affection. And to know that there, in that room where I was cradling my grandchildren, why, Saturday. Two traitors were touching each other as if they owned the place. I didn't scream. I didn't even go there. I just waited. Because what I needed was not confrontation. It was proof. And that Saturday, I had them all. You know, there's one thing that no one understands until they go through this. It's not the kiss, the mercy, or the body. It's the break. It is knowing that that person looked into your eyes, shared the bread, and yet chose to spit on the plate. It destroys, but it also teaches. It teaches that trust is not weakness. It is courage, and that being betrayed, it does not diminish the value of who we are. If you've ever felt something similar, worse tone, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you welcomed, comment below, just so I know I'm not alone. He writes like this, I know how it is, or I understand you. Sometimes that's all we need to move forward. No. I returned home on Sunday night. Everything was clean. Sheets changed. Cutlery in place. Julian was on the couch, watching TV as if he had spent the day mowing lawns. He looked at me, smiled, and said, how was it in Grapevine? I replied, oh, okay. Mabel sends greetings. And I went to the bedroom. As simple as that. But inside, something had changed. And when I opened the laptop, downloaded the audio and video from the camera, I confirmed everything Thomas had already said. No, they were there, laughing, kissing, talking about me like I'm a shadow. Julian said that he couldn't stand my saintly face anymore. And Allison, Rhea, he said he preferred his father-in-law because he knew what he was doing. Words that still burn my ears today. But I didn't cry. I just closed the files and saved them on a USB stick. I wrote in the notebook, complete evidence. They used my bed. They said, I'm naive. I saved everything. Because the truth is, from then on, it was no longer about pain. It was about answer. And the answer, it was going to start with something he would never expect. A bottle, a silent exchange, and a Sunday night he would never forget. Can you imagine what I changed in that room before he came in again? Because he thought he was going to experience a secret pleasure. But what he experienced, it was something else. The night was hot, the kind that seems to hold the air in our chest. Everything was silent, except for the crickets outside and the discreet ticking of the kitchen clock. Julian had already gone to sleep, or pretended to sleep, and I stood up. I put on my flowered robe. tied it tightly, and went to the garage. His car was there. As always, I opened the door slowly, without making a sound, ah, as if I already knew every creak of that vehicle. I lit up the interior with a small lantern that was in my sewing bag. It was exactly where I remembered it. The tube, tucked into the glove compartment, between insurance papers and an old bottle of eye drops, when Abdindion and Tasha Articulor. I took it carefully, as if holding a secret. I went back inside, in the laundry, where the light is dim and the smell is always of soap. I put on rubber gloves and started my work. I emptied the original contents into a baggie that I then discarded. I took industrial superglue, the one we use in the grocery store, to fix shelves. Transparent as water, but firm as revenge. I filled the tube calmly, drop by drop, no rush. Closed. I cleaned the nozzle well with a damp cloth. I left everything meticulously the same. It had no smell. No. It had no color. But the effect. He would feel this one for days. I got back in the car and put the tube right where it was. The same way. The same position. I closed the glove compartment, checked everything, and returned home with a quiet heart. It wasn't hate. It wasn't anger. It was justice. Cold, silent, feminine. The justice that only a betrayed woman can apply with elegance. The next morning, I prepared coffee as usual. I served the eggs, the bacon. Julian arrived in the kitchen with the key in his hand, smiling, saying that I deserved a few days of rest. Go easy. My love, enjoy Dallas. I will miss you. I smiled. Take care of the house for me. I gave her a light kiss on the cheek and left with my small suitcase. I went around the block and went straight to Mrs. Hudson's house. She welcomed me in her sweet way, offered me tea, and let me stay in the back room, where the window looked out exactly at my house. From there, I saw everything. I turned on my old radio and left it on the fire department's emergency channel. Daniel taught me how to do that years ago. When he started in the battalion, he was always careful with me. He always told me, if you hear a siren, you know where to run. I heard, and as I heard, it was almost 3 in the afternoon when I saw Julian's car park. He went down alone. The siren. 30 minutes later, Allison appeared. He entered as someone who already knew the way, laughing, with that provocative walk that I knew so well. They brought wine, and I saw it. They left the door ajar, as if they were at home, and maybe, no, for them, they really were. Time passed slowly on top. When you get on the system, I need your one. Every minute seemed to weigh tons. I didn't move. I only listened to the radio. And it was close to 4 that the request came. Firm voice, urgent, Niseo. Oh, no, this they said that. Unit 18. Emergency call. Yes. Code Red. Hyde Park. Private residence. Intervention required. Yeah. 2 victims arrested in an intimate situation. To repeat, urgent intervention. My heart raced. I got up, went to the window, and then I saw it. The sirens cutting through the street, the neighbors opening the curtains, a big truck pulling up right in front of me, firefighters coming down, running. Mrs. Howe Hudson Howelteen next to me, with her hand on her mouth, one of Chiwan. And finally, Daniel, my stepson, running through the door that I once painted blue with so much affection. And there, they so come. In that moment, frozen in time, I knew unless I walked out, and I should not stop yet right here. What I needed to do now, it was to decide what would come next, because the scandal had exploded, but the fall of Julian and Allison was just getting started. No. And can you imagine the expression on Daniel's face? When did he find out who were the 2 glued that he had to separate in that room? Because the pain I felt, now it was his too. The window of Mrs. Hudson's guest room gave a perfect angle to my balcony, mine, and from there, hidden behind the lace curtain, I watched the circus go up in flames. Literally, what no one knew, not Julian, not Allison, not the gossipy neighbors across the street, was that, in addition to the super glue, I had also left a frying pan on the stove, with a cloth soaked in cooking oil folded over it. The fire was off, of course, but the oven timer precisely adjusted to turn on the lighter at 4 p.m. And since that kitchen is old and the security sensor doesn't work right, it only took half an hour for smoke to start rising through the windows like a signal from heaven. What came next was the most embarrassing spectacle Hyde Park had ever witnessed. Muffled screams, frantic banging on the wall, a smell of glue mixed with desperation. And then the radio in Mrs. Hudson's little room sizzled again. Outside, rescue team, potential house fire, trapped victims, Hyde Park. I looked at my hostess, and she just said, "Beloved Lord, in less than 5 minutes. The street became a painting of red lights and sirens. The door of my house was broken into. Daniel came in first. My stepson, I did one chop down. The man I grew up as a son, who brought me flowers on Mother's Day, aren't you? Who cried in my lap when he lost his first tooth. I can't even imagine what he felt when he pushed that door and saw the father, no, his own father, naked, glued by the waist to his own wife, Allison crying, embarrassed, Julian sweating, trying to cover the embarrassment with a pillowcase. That scene must have torn his soul in half, and yet, he stood up. The firefighters looked at each other. One. Honest, one tried to stifle his laughter. Another turned his back, and Daniel, he only stared, with his mouth half open, the gaze of someone who had his childhood torn away in a single blow. It didn't take long for the neighborhood to start commenting. On a street like ours, where every curtain hides a peek and every cup of tea comes with gossip. The first siren was enough for half the neighborhood to line up on the sidewalk. I saw everything through the window. The expressions, the whispers, the cell phone cameras. No one knew exactly what had happened. But the news spread like wildfire. Something very strange had happened at Mrs. Y. Jones' house. Lene Pauk Adediwan. And it really happened. Julian was taken by ambulance. Allison, too. Separated with the help of an industrial solvent that they had to bring from the barracks itself. Daniel didn't say anything to anyone. How? He just left through the back door, walked to the end of the street, and sat on the curb. When he said, "At one quarter, he stayed there for almost an hour, head down, without understanding how his father and the woman he loved were capable of that. I didn't go to him. It was not yet time, because when the shame is too great, sometimes the mother's silence is the only possible blanket. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. This makes more difference than you think, because every time a woman like me speaks, another is freed. When I returned to my house in the late afternoon, well, the smell of smoke still hung in the air. The bed was empty, the open windows, the sheet thrown on the floor, stained with glue, sweat, sin, nailbar. I walked slowly to the kitchen. I turned off the oven. I washed my hands, and I went to the living room. Good job, so there on the clock, my fan, it's 7 o'clock. The camera was still flashing. I carefully pulled it out, turned off, and he smiles. Justice, when it comes at the right time, does not need applause. It just needs to be seen. But what happened next? Well, no one was prepared. Because when the truth spreads, it does not choose direction. And one of the secrets that Julian kept had not yet been revealed. And when I found out, that's when everything changed. The scene was an open-air parade of shame. The sirens were still turning as they began to leave the house. First came the firefighters, with hard faces, one of them shaking his head as if he had seen too much. Then, the paramedics, a man and a woman carrying the stretcher where Julian was lying, covered by a white sheet up to his neck. Next to it, another stretcher, Allison. The two were held by the waist, as if fate had decided that the punishment would be to share every second of humiliation. With each step they took towards the ambulance, more people appeared on the sidewalk. Neighbors I had barely seen for months were there, wide-eyed, cell phones in hand, recording everything. Mrs. Hudson, who had just offered me tea, was on the porch with her cell phone held firm, registering with a calm that only war widows understand. It was then that a child, Marjorie's grandson, I think, asked loudly, Mom, why are they glued like this? The mother did not answer. He just covered the boy's ears and turned his back. The shame was so great that it seemed to run down the sidewalks. And I was there, across the street, standing, wow, silent, Manyan Reodusture, a sight on a Sarganon, invisible. Nobody looked at me, how, and I preferred it that way. That show wasn't about me. It was about them. The world finally saw what I had known for a long time. Daniel left last, pale as a sheet, the eyes glazed, the breath short. He seemed not to step on the ground. No. One of his fellow firefighters tried to hold his arm, offer support, but he let go. He staggered alone to the side of the house, where he leaned against the fence and stood there, motionless, a man torn in half, trying to put together the pieces of dignity that still remained among the rubble of it all. I wanted to run to him, embrace him, to say that everything would pass, but I knew that sometimes the best consolation is time. And time, my dear, has a very particular way of healing, scratching before it heals. Julian tried to call me twice that evening. I saw his name flashing on the cell phone display. I let it play. Then I turned off the device. Let him speak with conscience. If he wanted consolation, I had nothing left to offer. And I know there are people who will hear this and think, but, Barbara, it was too cruel. After everything I delivered, everything he wore, every night he slept with me while I lay with her in the shadows, is a little public truth really cruelty? Or is it just the natural consequence of those who live on lies? In this, Hudson's video went around the neighborhood in a matter of hours, in Facebook groups, in WhatsApp messages from the ladies of the church, even in the organic market group. Someone added a caption that read, "Never underestimate what a silent woman is capable of doing." I did. Oh, and I confess that I smiled. No deceit, don't you know? Not because of the scandal. I also made an interpercent but for the lesson, because there are things that can only be learned when life rubs in the face. And look, if you're still with me this far, it's because you may have already felt this feeling. To see everything you built being disrespected in front of you. And even so, hence, choose not to lower yourself, no, because, no, sometimes the only strength we have is to continue standing. And if I can ask you one thing, stays until the end, because what I found out soon after, it made everything look even more rotten. And it forced me to make the hardest decision of my life, to cut off once and for all the one I protected the most. Are you ready for this? Because the next part, it will hurt. The hospital was cold, even in that September heat, the kind of cold that doesn't come from the air conditioning, but from the silence of the corridors, from the white walls that seem to know more than they count. I arrived with a bag in my hands and a calm face. I entered as if visiting an old friend, and when the receptionist asked who I was, I replied with that tone that only time gives. "I'm the wife, She didn't even blink. He just pointed in the direction of the room. And off I went, firm steps, heart at peace. When I entered, now, did you not tell? They were already separated. Separate, each on a stretcher, with thin blankets covering the parts. Julian looked at me as if he had seen a ghost. Allison turned her face the other way. Mom. Ah. I approached slowly and left 2 small tubes on the table. Ointment for burns. He said, "No, it helps to calm down. Leave you on." They thanked him quietly, not knowing that inside there was no relief at all. It was strong mustard, the kind we used in the grocery stores. Brisket. Burned. And how it burned. Oh, I left before they noticed. But the burning that interested me, it wasn't on the skin. It was in consciousness. Daniel was in the hallway, sitting, with his head down. I approached without saying anything. I just sat next to it. He didn't look at me. I took a deep breath, took out of my bag the pen drive I had carried with me since that Saturday, and put it in the palm of his hand. Listen to this. But he listens alone. And only then, look for me, if you want. Ah. He frowned. He took the object, like someone holding a grenade, and I left. In the car. Before starting, I took a deep breath. No, there are memories that stick to us, like the smell of old wood. That moment in the hospital was one of them. The smell of disinfectant. Julian's pale skin. Wow. Allison's embarrassed face. On something help. And my son. My grown boy, about to hear something that would change everything. It's strange how some memories become more vivid than photos. They have sound, color, and endurance. Now, what else? Not temperature? They come back alone when we least expect it. Do you have any like this? Tell me in the comments. A moment that has stuck to his skin to this day. Sometimes, sharing is what turns pain into strength. Daniel called me that same night. He didn't say hello. How? Nor did he ask if I was okay. The first word that came out of his mouth was, "When?" "When?" I replied, "It's been weeks." He was silent for a while, then said, "What about that recording?" "Now, Mummy, he was planning to take you out of the bakery, sign a false document. She called you old, said she was going to take everything in your place." I took a deep breath. "No, I know." He sniffed, the choked breath of those who try to hold back their tears. "And you? What are you going to do now?" I looked at the ceiling of my room, where the fan was spinning slowly. Wow. Like the twists and turns that life takes. Nothing now. Not yet. Because when we are women, and even more, old woman, we learn that not everything is solved in a hurry. Sometimes it's time that brings the right answer. But at that moment, one thing was clear. Adultery was just the tip. The fund was even more rotten. And what Julian and Allison were up to, it went far beyond my body. My whole life was at risk. And that's where a lot of people are wrong. He thinks that betrayal is just a hidden kiss, a cheap motel, a laugh on the cell phone. No. Betrayal. How? For real. That's it, a world trial. A standstill is when someone you love starts digging your grave with affection. And you. He still asks if he needs help. Julian wanted my house, my part of the bakery, arousing me. And she, Allison, I wanted the same, but with a smile on his face and a lie on his tongue. And just when you think you've seen it all, that's where the truth still holds the final blow. Because the next morning, Daniel returned, now with red eyes. It's a question that chilled me inside. Can you imagine what he asked of me? Because what he said changed the course of everything. Daniel was sitting on the edge of an olive green armchair, one of those covered with a fabric that creaks with every movement, his head bowed, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped in a grip that revealed everything he was trying to hold inside. I entered slowly, without making a sound. It was the waiting room of the hospital, but it looked more like a confessional. I sat next to him, in silence. I let time make the first contact. It wasn't until a few minutes later that he looked up and looked at me, and there I saw my boy again. Not the firefighter, not her husband, not Julian's son, but the Daniel I helped raise when his mother passed away. The teary eyes, the tired skin, and an emptiness in my chest that I knew all too well. The truth hurts. Son, I said, in a low voice, but it's better than living deceived. He took a deep breath. You? Did you know everything? I nodded. Yes, slowly. When I nodded, I'll trust a bit. How long has it been? He asked, almost in a whisper. Nay, from the napkin. But what really confirmed it was the glove box. He lowered his eyes again. He ran his hand over his face. And why didn't you tell me? I looked ahead at the clock, stopped on the wall. Because sometimes you have to let people show who they are in their own words. If I told you before, you would doubt it. I would think it was an exaggeration. Remember? That it was the pain of jealousy, or an old woman's thing. But now you heard from their mouths. He shook his head, and the cry came. Not that desperate cry of a movie, but the contained cry of someone who was wounded deep down. He cried as if he understood that he lost two people at the same time, and with them, the life he thought he had. I was an idiot, wasn't I? He whispered. Now. I took his hand. No. Oh, you were a good man, trying to believe in love. That's never going to be done. The mistake is not trusting. The mistake is to remain on the side of those who destroy while we trust. We stayed there for a while longer. No, just the two of us. Mother and son of pain, of sorrow, of new beginnings. He did not apologize, and I didn't ask for explanations, because at that time, the only thing left between us was silence, and that kind of silence. Son, nay, it is sacred. When he finally got up, he said he was going to get his things. I was going to leave the house. Leave everything. I held his arm. Chuck, you don't have to leave. That house is mine. And now, it's yours too. He looked at me, confused. But what about Julian? I took a deep breath. Julian, tired on the house. You will discover that what you built on top of the lie, it does not sustain itself for long. And I have the will, the documents, everything in my name. I was just waiting for the right time. And you, there on the other side. Have you experienced this? To hold a hard truth to protect someone? Or to discover something that turned you inside out, but deep down, set you free? If you have lived or known a story like this, tell me in the comments, because sometimes just knowing that we are not alone on this bumpy road that is life, it already gives a damn relief. Daniel left the hospital with heavy shoulders, but with firm feet, and I came home with a decision. If they thought they could take everything from me, it was time to show that those who built that life, it was me. And if there's one thing I've learned in these 66 years, it's that those who build with love, he knows very well how to rebuild with dignity. And can you imagine what I found in the papers Julian left in the office that same night? Because what I discovered, it changed not only my story, but the course of everything that would come after. I returned to the hospital the next day with a thick envelope under my arm. I wore my best navy blue coat, the one that Julian always said made me look judge-like. I really wanted to look like one, because that day I wasn't going to ask or ask. I was going to decide. No. And Judge, I arrived at the reception, asked for his room number, and followed the corridor as if walking to a ceremony, not of love, but of end. Julian was sitting on the bed, with a wet towel on his forehead and a poor face. When he saw me, he tried to smile. Barbara, I knew how so badly unexpected. I was waiting for you. I wanted to explain. I didn't say anything. I walked to the table next to the bed, opened the envelope, and began to pull out one by one, the evidence. The photo of him with Allison at the restaurant, the printed email with Daddy, the transcribed recording, with the exact excerpts in which they plotted against me. Finally, I took out the divorce papers, which were already filled out. All that was missing was my signature. I took the pen from my bag, looked him right in the eye, eyes I once called home, and signed with a steady hand. You tried to take everything away from me, but it was you who lost. Julian began to babble, to justify himself, to say that he was confused, that it was the heat of the moment, that it was a mistake, that he loved me, that he never meant to hurt me. I let him speak for a few seconds, then pushed the envelope towards him. The copy is yours. And I left without looking back. The second bedroom was at the end of the hallway. Allison was lying on her side, facing the wall, eyed softly. When he heard my footsteps, he turned his face, his eyes red, his voice breaking. Mrs. Jones. Sorry, once I did job. I don't know what happened to me. It was a mistake. I loved Daniel. I stood there for a moment, just watching, not out of cruelty, but because sometimes the silence of the people makes more noise than any scream. I opened the bag again and took out the marriage certificate. Aborted. Now, Liz, modest chance start. Daniel's official request, already approved by the registry office. I placed it carefully on the sheet, close to her hand. She looked, "Us, read," and burst into tears again. But I was already leaving, and I didn't even carry the weight of anger with me, because when we give everything from the heart and are still betrayed, pain turns to stone. But later, this stone becomes a wall, and I was rebuilding myself, brick by brick, in silence. You know, there are people who ask me if I felt like screaming, breaking everything, slamming doors. No, because my justice has never been in violence. My justice has always lived in my calm, because what stands calmly? Me? No one tears it down in a hurry. When I left the hospital that afternoon, I felt that some part of me had also been discharged. I was no longer the wife, nor the stepmother, nor the partner in the grocery store. I was just Barbara Jones. That's it. Finally, it was enough. But what I didn't know yet is that Julian would leave one last note, one that wasn't for me, and that could still cause another wound, or perhaps a release. Can you imagine what he wrote? And for whom? In the days that followed, the silence of the house was replaced by notifications, not mine, but from Daniel's cell phone, which rang non-stop with calls from a number he knew all too well. Allison called in the morning, in the afternoon, in the early morning. He sent long messages with tearful texts, empty promises, apologies that looked more like cheap soap opera scripts. One day, I know, she wrote, "Oh, meet me at the pier of Lady Bird Lake. Only for 5 minutes. I need to explain." But Daniel had already understood everything he needed. He blocked the number. No anger, no speech. He just blocked it. And that, Artinian, for me, was one of the greatest tests of strength I've ever seen. Because sometimes it's not shouting that shows firmness. It is the firm silence of the decision. Julian loved my tear and yourself but calm. In turn, Sigma Kais started with another tactic. He sent me a letter, handwritten, and investigated with that handwriting of his that I thought was beautiful before, but now it looked like a bunch of lies drawn. He said that he was sorry, that it was all a mistake of weakness, that he was needy, that he was afraid of growing old and feeling invisible, that once had taken advantage of it, that the kisses, the touches, the promises had no meaning. "You are my rock, Barbara," he wrote. As if those words still had any value. I read it to the end. Well, then I folded the letter and put it in one of the boxes in the basement where I keep things that no longer serve, along with old bills, expired prescriptions, and photos of people who have left without saying goodbye. The neighborhood, this one, did not forget what it saw. In Hyde Park, things go from mouth to mouth now, faster than printed newspapers. Mrs. Wadisell Hudson brought me cornbreads the following week and whispered in my ear, "Allison is moving." I saw her carrying boxes with a boy like Daniel. I just thanked the buns, and I ate in silence, each piece as if it were a brick, rebuilding my dignity. Julian tried to get back to the church. St. John's Episcopal, now, the one we attended together on Sundays, where he sang the hymns and patted the other men on the back as if he were an example of a devoted husband. But that morning, when he entered, on Betrayal, the pastor just looked away, and no one came to shake his hand. He sat in the back, alone, and left before the service was over. The following week, he did not return. The boy see at the grocery store, which I now ran alone with Darlene. Customers asked about me. "Oh, is Mrs. Barbara coming today?" And when they saw Julian passing by on the sidewalk, they looked away or nodded slowly, as if to say, "Well, we know. We saw it." Because scandals catch fire fast, but shame not. This slow burning. There was an afternoon when he entered the store. I was in the back, checking the jam stock. Leo Doctow. Darlene came to warn me. "Hez here. Ah," and I just said, "So, you know what to do." She walked to the counter with the firmness of someone who does not accept dirt next to what is clean. "Julian, we don't serve you here anymore. Please leave." He tried to argue. "Darlene, you know me." But she only repeated, "Here, we meet Barbara." And there is your dear. That's enough. He left without buying anything. And that night, Darlene brought me a hot coffee and said, "You're not alone. No, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe." If this story touched you, even if in a single piece, enjoy this video and subscribe here to the channel. Let's make this story reach those who need to remember that dignity is still the greatest power a woman can have. And yet, even after all this, Julian didn't give up. The next week, he tried to leave a letter in the mailbox of Mrs. Hudson's house. He knew I was there. But what was in that letter? It was different. It wasn't for me. It was for Daniel. And the contents? It was a last desperate attempt, but also a confession. What is it, Senovigo? It's our Siemens. One that could change everything once again. Can you imagine what a man like Julian would write to his own son after destroying his life with her bare hands? Because what Daniel read, it wasn't just about the past. It was a secret about the future. Returning home, after all, that was like entering a familiar place, but with a different look. The door, which had creaked so many times for him, now opened only for me and my son. Daniel came with me, And so I watched it into Bell. He said he needed a break, that he didn't want to know about an empty apartment or the silence that hurts. And I understood, because this house, despite wounds, was still the only place where we could fit in the whole of us, and not just the broken pieces. We start with the fourth. We took everything away, from the pillows with an expired smell to the portraits that once seemed eternal. We painted the walls a light yellow, almost butter, and when we finished, we sat on the floor, near our journey, on the beast, with our hands dirty with paint and our hearts tired, but at peace. He looked at me and said, "Wow, it's more beautiful now." And Daddy Janis did our search was in that toilet. Mom, the house, the house. We, and I smiled. I smiled unhurriedly, as if waiting a long time to hear something like that. In the following days, we threw away the old sheets, changed the curtains, replanted the hydrangeas that he himself gave me years ago on Mother's Day. The room smelled of apple cake and freshly brewed coffee again. And the kitchen, how little had hearts. Ah, the kitchen. This one has become our altar. Every afternoon, after he returned from the barracks, we had coffee there, without having to say much, because sometimes, meantime, silence is also a way of loving. The grocery store is completely mine again. So I'm down. Darlene and I rearranged the shelves, like someone sweeping sorrows along with the dust. The customers came back, one by one. Some brought hugs, others just a complimented look. No one needed to comment. Everyone already knew, and he respected the quiet way I rebuilt my place in the world. Wow. And Daniel, well, Daniel was no longer the same, but it was better. All Leo was better. He took care of me without suffocating. Went to the market, installed lamps, cleaned the yard. Every time I left for the ship, before closing the door, I would turn to me and say, thank you for not giving up on me. And I answered only with my eyes, because Mother, when she really loves, never gives up. He just waits for his son to find himself. There was a night when it rained heavily. One of those rains that hit the roof like impatient fingers. I was in the living room with a blanket on my legs and a chamomile tea in my hands. He came. I sat on the couch next to me and asked, "Nay, Mom, do you still feel angry?" I thought for a while. No, anger was the first to go away. Only the longing remained. Not his, but the woman I was before all this. He leaned his head on my shoulder. When the time but boy judged twice, we were like this, listening to the water fall, as if the sky was also cleaning what we couldn't. And if you've been following this story so far, we'll tell what, the most memorable moment is yet to come, because the end of pain is not the end of history. Sometimes it's the beginning of something we never imagined. Follow me down, because there is one more letter, one surprise, one final settlement that still needs to happen. And it was on an ordinary afternoon. while I was tending to my plants in the backyard. That Daniel appeared with an envelope in his hand. Ma, this has arrived here. Mom, day. See if you want to open it. When I read the sender, my heart jumped. It was Julian, and it was no longer a request for forgiveness. It was something else, a warning, or maybe a threat, because that letter had a name on it, a name that until then I thought I had already been buried in the past. And if I tell you who it was, can you believe it? The envelope had that name that I hadn't heard in over 20 years, a name that was buried in the folds of time. Along with pains that I never really knew if they had passed or just fallen asleep. But before I opened that new chapter, I still had a living history in my hands. My grocery store, that little place in the heart of the North Loop that had already seen my pain silenced, my hands calloused, my courage wrapped in packets of flour and fresh bread. In the months following the scandal, the store took on a different air, a new smell of respect. People came from far away, some just to see, others to buy a pie, a jar of jam, a word. A blue-haired lady brought me flowers and said, "You don't know how much your story has strengthened me." I smiled, thanked him, and continued packing the cookies, because I never knew how to make a speech, but he always knew how to continue. The sign at the grocery store remained the same, faded by time, but now there was something in the eyes of the people who walked through the door. They didn't just see products on the shelves. They saw dignity. They saw resistance. And I, with my apron embroidered with the name Barbara J. on my chest, just continued the routine. I arranged the oranges carefully, organized the bills calmly, listened to the local radio while packing packages with the same affection that one day I packed the dreams of a marriage that did not succeed. There was a day when a journalist from the Austin Chronicle showed up, young, lively, full of paper and tape recorder in hand. He called me an icon of resilience. I laughed inside. I said to her, "How, my daughter, I am not an icon of anything. I'm just a woman who has been through a lot and decided not to scream." She insisted, I'm not going to so delay. He wanted to know how I had thought of everything, how I had managed to stay calm. How I had faced the betrayal of 2 family members so gracefully. And I just replied, "Elegance is what is left when we have lost everything, except the shame on our faces." She smiled, no, but got the message. There was no material. There was no photo. And I continued to be what I always was. Invisible to some, unforgettable to others. Sometimes older couples appeared, holding hands, saying that they came just to see me. "You are an example," they said. I just offered coffee, and I exchanged recipes, as I always did, because it wasn't revenge that changed me. It was patience. It was waiting for time to show who was who. It was to have resisted without turning into stone. And in that routine, where everything seemed finally quiet, Julian's envelope came back to my mind. I left it on the kitchen table for days, not because I was afraid, but because he wanted to open calmly, with a clean heart. And when I finally opened it, I found more than words. I found another hidden story. Wow. An old debt, a woman from the past, a secret that wasn't just mine. It was also Daniel's. And at that moment, I realized that my role in this story was not over yet, because before the end point, there was still one last truth that needed to be revealed. But what could this man, after all, still hide from me and of his own son? That afternoon, the sun seemed kinder, as if even he knew my heart needed rest. I was sitting in the backyard, with my old cup of chamomile in my hands, listening to the wind blow through the leaves, as if whispering old advice. My knees hurt, as they always hurt when the weather changes, but my chest, this one, was lighter. I took my recipe book. Oh, the same one where I wrote down the name of the industrial glue next to the pumpkin pie preparation method. But this time, I didn't go to write any cooking recipes. I wrote sentences, small sentences that perhaps no one will ever read. But that, for me, sure, have become survival wisdom. The handcloud and the kissionestero. If love turns to poison, it's time to close the bottle. Whoever betrays trust loses his home. Silence can be stronger than any scream. Crying is not weakness. It is the cleansing of the soul. Ah, and between one line and another, I thought about how time is a silent couturier. He mends the holes that life opens, slowly, with an invisible but firm line. Daniel was at work. The house was so quiet that I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock right there in the backyard. I looked up at the sky and remembered who I was. Of the girl who left home at 19 to get married, of the widow who thought she would no longer have love, of the woman who believed again. How? And the lady who had to see everything fall apart to understand what real strength was. I missed it. And ha, yes, but not Julian's, nor Allison's. I missed the simple days when love was still whole, of the blind faith I had in people. But along with the nostalgia came relief. Now, because now, I didn't curse. And he went out, and they more optimistic. My documents were safe. My name was intact. I didn't let the mistakes of others stain my story. And my heart, this one still has a scar, but it is whole and wiser. No. Many people think that old age is an end, that after a certain age, we just wait. He waits for his grandchildren, waits for retirement, waits for death. But I tell you, it's a lie, because there are things that we only understand when we get older, and it has strength that is only born after a lot of stumbling. And if you've come this far listening to my story, you might understand what I'm saying, because time does not erase what we live. He reveals. It shows who was really on our side, who deserved our love, who only passed to teach, and who tried to destroy us, but ended up strengthening us. I closed the notebook gently and leaned it on my lap. The wind turned the last page by itself, as if life said, "It's not over yet." And it was true, because Julian's envelope, the one that arrived days before, didn't just bring memories. He brought a revelation that I did not expect, one last missing piece in the puzzle of everything that happened. A confession, and along with it, a name, a name I hadn't read in decades. And that can change everything I thought I had already understood. But who was this person? And why did Julian decide to talk about it now, when he already seemed defeated? Tomorrow, he'll find out. Nearly. And maybe you'll find out along with me. The morning after that envelope, Monsieur Noir, now can't stray. After reading every line Julian wrote, with a trembling hand, and guilt trickling between sentences, I closed the notebook with the last note. Even poison reveals itself when the bottle cracks. He confessed not only to the planned coup with Allison, but also that the idea of the contract was not his. It was someone else's. An old name? A sister of mine? Wow. Disappeared from the family due to greed. But at that point in life, honestly, that information no longer hurt. It was not surprising. I didn't want any more answers. I wanted peace. And peace is not found digging through the rubble of the past. I got up from my chair, straightened my hair with my hand, and went to the balcony. The sun was already setting. Leo child, dyeing everything with that golden hue that only Texas knows how to offer. Daniel appeared with 2 cloth bags on his arm and a serene smile on his face. Mom, I ordered your ingredients. Are you going to make the pudding today? I laughed with my eyes and replied, Yes, sure, with the old recipe, and among the replanted flowers, the smell of sugar burning in the air, and the comfortable silence of those who know they have faced the worst. I knew my soul had come home. Julian disappeared from the neighborhood. They say he moved to another state. Allison, the last news was of a request for annulment that was not even judged. And as for me, well, I stayed here, whole, standing, well known, without carrying the weight of others on your back, because what they did to me could have broken me. But I chose to turn pain into dignity. Today, boss, my story is not about a scandal. It's about a new beginning, about not being silent, even when silence seems easier, about knowing when to stop feeding those who only suck you, and, most of all, about remembering that self-love also ages, but never weakens. If there's one thing I've learned, well, it's that some losses are deliverances, and that we are never too old to save ourselves. Time has not made me bitter. It made me try out. And if you have gone through any similar pain, if you have been betrayed, forgotten, diminished, no, you can still rebuild yourself. Life doesn't end when someone leaves. It starts again, and it starts again lighter. I want to thank you for staying with me so far. for having listened to me. I need undone. From soul to soul. This is priceless. If this story touched your heart in any way, leave a like. It's like a tight hug. You know? It warms us up inside. And there's some part out there. And if you want to continue with me in the next conversations, subscribe here to the channel. Consider this an invitation to come back for the next coffee. Oh, and tell me where you're watching from. Write in the comments your city, your state. It is so beautiful to see how many stories connect us throughout Brazil. And it also activates the bell, so you don't lose it when the coffee is ironed again. Now, if you want to hear another true story, full of courage and emotion, don't go yet. Listen to the next story that will appear on your screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Now, watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.